All right, we are live. Hi, everybody. Thank you for being here. We will get our conversation started in just a few minutes. I try to schedule the sessions at 12:05 to give everybody time if you're grabbing your lunch. If you're at least Eastern time, it's lunchtime. So we've got our guest, David, and I will introduce him to everybody in just a minute. But I want to let everyone know we are here and we are getting ready to have our conversation. So hopefully you guys are ready to join us and we'll get started in about 3 or 4 minutes. So take your time. You don't have to rush. Just get settled in and we will get started as soon as we can. And if you guys, when you join in, if you could share a comment to let us know you're out there, that's great. We love seeing your feedback and comments during the conversation. It lets us know that you're there and that you're engaging with us. And if this is your first LinkedIn Live session with me or with anyone, I want to just share with you that when you do make comments, we can see them. We cannot respond to them in the chat. There's some sort of connectivity challenge between StreamYard, which is the streaming service, and LinkedIn Live, that the comments come in, but we cannot respond to them in the chat. So whenever you do comment, I will share the comments with everyone and we will try to answer them verbally if possible. If you are joining us from YouTube Live, we will be able to see your comments and we can respond to them in the chat, but I still like to kind of bring them forward during the conversation. So the more engaged you are, the better the conversation tends to be. So please feel free to share your comments with us throughout the conversation. Let's see, any other? I think that's all the housekeeping we have. So it's a little after 12. I am going to get us kicked off. So welcome, David. Thank you for being here today. For everyone who's joining us, I'm so excited to welcome David Schwarz to our roundtable conversation. He is the head of corporate communications for Daily Pay. I'm super jealous because he's sitting in Manhattan, and that's one of my favorite cities ever. And I haven't been able to go since COVID, so I cannot wait to get back up there and visit. Maybe in the fall when it's not super hot would be a good time. So I'll come in and check out your offices again. So welcome, David. Thank you for being here.
Thanks so much for having me. It's a really pleasure and honor to be here to really have a very relevant discussion of a topic that everyone is talking about, really almost topic A of everyone's mind. So great to be here.
It really is. Yeah. And, you know, when you think about my audience is primarily folks within the human resources and the people space, but we also have people who are people leaders, folks who are CEOs and COOs leading organizations. So there really isn't anyone within an organization who's not impacted by communications. And it's probably the number one issue that most organizations struggle with is how do we provide robust, meaningful, consistent communication to our employees? How do we know what resonates with them? How do we connect with them? Especially in organizations that don't have everyone sitting behind a computer or a desk, right? If you're in a manufacturing environment, if you're in a hospital environment where a lot of the workers aren't sitting there, they're moving around or they're engaging with your end users, and finding creative ways to connect with those people is really important, right? Everybody wants to feel like they're a part of something. And when we think about what we just went through with COVID, I can only imagine the challenges that you and your teams were facing when it comes to communicating with employees. And that's kind of the lens of and the slant of the conversation for today is as we start moving into this post-pandemic world, how do we stay connected? How do we further communicate with people so they understand what they're doing, how they're supposed to do it, what their expectations are, and also feel like they're a part of something great? So I have a few questions I'd love to ask you, and then we'll just let the conversation go from there if that works for you.
Absolutely. I think you're all the points you made, all the questions, that we were starting with really hit the issue on the head for sure.
Excellent. So when we think about, 2020 was one hell of a year. We've all been through it, right? And we're still going through it, depending on your geography. And certainly certain parts of the world are still really struggling with COVID. Fortunately, those of us who sit in the US, we're starting to feel some relief in at least in where I am. And I think we're going to see more and more of that. And along with that, we have organizations who are now saying, we want you to come back to the office. And so before we get to the back to the office thing, how did your role or responsibilities as head of corporate communications, how was that impacted during COVID and now that we're coming out of it? I'd love to know what your responsibilities maybe looked like before, and then how did you adapt for COVID and going forward?
Sure. To start off with, I'd like to start off with a quote from Winston Churchill. And he said, a big difference between management and leadership is communication, right? It's all about communication.
So true.
And so for any communications professional during COVID, you really had to really change your game and really focus internally on transparency, honesty. Right. I think what employees want to know is the truth, right? What is going on with our organization? How are we going to handle this crisis? What is my role in this situation? And, we've talked about, everyone handles, a crisis differently, right? And this was certainly traumatic on everyone. So the sensitivities that you had to have, and that goes for the communications team working in tandem with your HR team in creating a communication plan that really relates and connects to everyone. And so the first thing you need to do is have a plan, have a detailed plan of attack. We worked hand in hand with our HR, our people operations team in creating the narrative that again, talked about transparency and honesty and where, as a company, how we are seeing the situation and how everyone can relate to that situation. Again, because you want everyone to feel connected, and you also want to feel protected as well in these types of situations.
Right. That psychological and physical safety is so important to people now, right? And if we think about, if we dial back, 12 months or so, not only were we were dealing with the pandemic, but then we had the murder of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and the social unrest with, folks in the Black community saying like, stop. And fortunately, it's the support for social justice is grown outside of just the Black community, right? So we are now seeing organizations, companies, communication folks making a stand and making statements, right? You have an amazing CEO at Daily Pay, and Jason Lee has been a great advocate for all of the employees of Daily Pay, but also kind of making really bold statements about where Daily Pay stands when you're looking at all of these other elements, not just the pandemic. So I give you a ton of credit because I'm sure you were a part of crafting some of those messages that we've all seen, and you guys have done a great job of publishing your feelings and your perspectives on that. So how were you able to balance the challenges out with all of those things happening at one time? You have a plan, but your plan you can't predict what's going to happen, right? So how do you bring all of that together and still stay the course as an organization?
At Daily Pay, and thank you for saying those nice words, and with Jason Lee and Daily Pay, it started at the foundation of our values. And we have 7 values that we've communicated internally. And one of those values is we win with diversity. And that has been in the DNA of our organization since day one, right? So when you're communicating the values to your team, and those values, again, relate to listening and understanding your entire staff and your clients, right? And your partners that are so valuable to your business. Again, really, it's all about, again, creating that world of honesty and transparency during these really, very tumultuous times. So everyone feels like they have a seat at the table, and everyone feels that their voice is heard. The last thing you want are people to think that my opinion doesn't matter, or my thoughts don't count. And that's, again, at Daily Pay, I know so many other organizations really did a great job of this, is communicating to their staff that your voices matter, your opinions matter, and you do indeed have a seat at the table.
And I think that's so important, right? We know employees want to be seen, heard, valued, and understood. And when we can do that and create channels through which they can communicate both ways, right? So it's not just us communicating to them.
Right.
We are open to hearing what they have to share with us. That's where we really make that connection and we allow people to feel valued. And it's authentic, right? I think that's a key part of it. It's not, you're not just putting up your pride flag for June so that people see you've got the rainbow going on, right? It really is a part of the DNA of your organization. And I think you've been a critical part of bringing that to life and making sure that employees understand that it's not just a flavor of the day, but that you are authentically behind the words that you say, or that your organization shares, or that your CEO shares, or Jeannie, your chief marketing officer.
Yep.
Anyone who's speaking on behalf of the company, you have that alignment because it's based in your values. And I swear, everybody, I did not pay him to say that, because it's one of the things that I speak about all the time is how do you operationalize your values and bring them to life? Otherwise, if you don't, they're just words on a wall, right? They're just highly charged words. But if you don't operationalize it and really bring it forward throughout the DNA of your organization, what does it really mean? And I think you guys have done a great job in doing that. And that transparency is key in making that real.
Well, let's remember, communication is a two-way street, right? So you want to get input from everyone on the team. You want to, again, that's how they feel valued when you're, consistently having that two-way conversation. Like you said, it's not just about like posting, okay, here's the update. It's getting that two-way communication. So their input, they feel valued. They feel that they are part of the plan moving forward. And when folks feel valued, I really think they have more of a connection to the company.
Absolutely. So how do you, when you think about corporate or company communications, what are the ways in which that you have found, what are the most effective ways you have found to communicate with folks? Because immediately I think about email, right? That's what we all think about is email. But there's so much more to it than email alone. And what are some of the strategies or tools you've been able to implement that have served you and your employees really well to create that two-way communication? Because we know it's not one size fits all. And
Right.
as we talked about before, not all employees have access to email. So what other ways do you build your strategy around communication?
Well, one way, again, to start off is getting their input first, right? So whether that is through email, corresponding with the staff and getting their thoughts on, the issues that whatever you're relating to, whether it's whether it's back to work, office safety, having their input and then taking that back, right? And taking it back and analyzing and saying, okay, here is a snapshot of where we are. And then that should be a guidepost to your policies, right? Hearing from the voices of your staff, which are so important, which are so valued, right? And then you can make decisions based, especially those big, important internal decisions. And of course, now when we're talking about COVID, we're talking about people's health. We're talking about people's family health. So that has to be hypersensitive. So feedback from employees is paramount to creating policies that work for everyone.
Mm-hmm. And it's not a once a year employee survey.
No,
right?
no.
It has to be a living, breathing dialogue where folks feel, like, as you mentioned before, safety, right? They have to feel psychologically safe to raise up things that are concerns to them. And you've got to create that culture where people aren't driven by fear and that they feel as though their voices matter. And so how do you create that two-way communication? Because we know annual surveys are really, almost a thing of the past at this point, because by the time you get the data and you look at it and you analyze it and you make something of it, it's outdated, right? Things are moving so fast that the old school of once a year surveys just doesn't.
No. You have to start at the manager level. You have to be in communication with your team. whether it's in person, this year on Zoom, but it's that, that one-on-one communication. Check in with your staff at least once a week, if not more. Check and see how they're doing. What are they thinking? What are their opinions? How are their thoughts on what's going on? You can get to work later, right? You can talk about the upcoming project and the due date, but check in with them and see, how they're feeling about what's going on in the world. We talked about the tumultuous year we had a year ago. Let's open up that dialogue in a small group with your team or one-on-one, and how are they feeling? Check in on them from time to time, just to say, hey, how are you doing? Because that, again, these are unprecedented times, and your people are your greatest commodity. So you got to, that nurturing, that building them up, on their career path. But it also takes a moment to step back and say, how are you today?
And not accept I'm fine, right?
Right.
To really say, wait, but how are you?
Right.
Not how are
really
you?
Really mean it. Really. Not just, exactly. Not a cursory, how are you doing today? No, really, how are you today?
Yeah.
How are you feeling today? And in having and creating that open dialogue. And if you do that on a regular basis, it comes through as authentic, right? It doesn't come through as cursory. It's, oh yeah, how you doing? Okay, let's talk about the upcoming project. But instead, really, getting to know them, getting to know what's going on in their lives is certainly important. So that's where you start, right? It's not that once a year survey. It's that once a week or twice a week communication. That's where you build that foundation of that two-way communication with your staff.
Have you found any opportunities or any success in creating training programs for your people leaders? Like, do you spend time with them, or do the folks on your team spend time with them, kind of coaching them through how you build that dialogue, and what ways have you found to be effective in that regard?
Yeah, here at Daily Pay, there are different management trainings that we go through, again, to create this dialogue with your staff. And it's all, again, going back to how we view our team, right? Because we know that our people are our greatest commodity. So there are, lesson plans that we have gone through and training that we've gone through to really up all of our game. I've been doing this for, 25 years, but there's still so much to learn. And I think for all the executives on down, people who manage folks, there is still so much to learn, and keeping an open mind, not going in thinking, oh, I knew that. I know how to deal with people. And there's so much to learn, especially during these, like I said, some unprecedented times.
So what have been some of your most successful strategies to help drive connection outside of the traditional, you may have a newsletter, you may have that. And we know we want our people leaders to be connecting with their folks. But when you think about making sure, because there's only one Jason, right? There's only one you, there's only one Jeannie. You can't possibly meet with each and every employee regularly. And your organization is dispersed, right? You don't all sit in the same place. You're global at this point. What strategic elements have you been able to bring in to help that connectivity?
Right. To develop that personal connection, sometimes it's okay to not talk about work, right? To do things like a movie night, to have yoga once a week, to have meditation once a week, to have happy hours, to do check-ins when you're not checking in about work at all. We have, this thing, a donut, they call it, where you have a coffee and a donut virtually, and getting to know, your coworkers who may be across the country or across the world on a personal level. That's how you start developing those connections, right? Between you have a yoga meditation night, you have a movie night, you're bonding, you're connecting with people. Again, during these unprecedented times, you have to be creative, right? You have to be strategic, and you have to think, again, we see the data, and we've done research here at Daily Pay that folks are working longer hours, right? And so what they need, here's opportunities to bond in a fun way with their coworkers, right? Again, to have those fun events that we regularly schedule here. Have a happy hour, again, that really helps people develop those bonds that during these, when we're all remote, it really helps people stay connected.
And speaking of remote, I'm seeing a lot of organizations now making statements about employees coming back into the office, right? And we don't want to say back to work because many folks have been working all along. And then a lot of folks who were either impacted with furloughs or layoffs, there's a lot of open positions now. So, a lot of people who were not working are literally back to work. And then a lot of folks who worked through the entire pandemic they're fatigued, they're stressed, their anxiety levels are off the charts. And now we have some CEOs who are mandating that employees come back to the office, right? There's hard deadlines by July 1st. 30% of our workers must be, in the office at least 3 days a week or what have you. I mean, it varies, right? What are you seeing from that perspective? And I'd love to know your thoughts on kind of, is it going to benefit companies to make those mandates, or what are you thinking?
Well, a recent USA Today Harris poll study said 40% of Americans want to work from home full time. And also in that study, 31% said one of the reasons is that they're literally afraid to be in a room in a big office with their coworkers. 27% said that they're afraid to commute to work. So that you have to be sensitive to people's, again, going through the trauma of the last 15, 16 months. A lot of people are not ready to go back to the normal. So that's where, creating a hybrid system that we have, that we'll be instituting here at Daily Pay, having, but again, it's that transparency and that honesty and people being able to speak out to their supervisor saying, I'm not ready to go back yet, or I'm not ready to go back 5 days a week, or maybe I need flexible hours. So this is a time to be flexible. This is a time to listen. This is a time to be transparent on your company policies. On the flip side, there is something to be said about mentorship. And there is something to be said about being in the office, especially for younger employees, and learning the job, seeing the job, experiencing the job. So there, again, there's not one size fits all, right? And I think for some people, hey, they feel much more safer and comfortable, at least for now, or maybe going forward, working from home or maybe some sort of hybrid. But some people want to get back to work, right? Some people want to be back in the office, and that's where you really have to communicate with your staff. Be honest with your staff and transparent with your staff.
And I think it's, you hit on something, right? It's flexibility. It's moving away from the traditional command and control where, the boss says, this is what I expect, and everybody marches to whatever that order might be. Is we don't have to be that, right? And I know from an HR perspective and an HR lens, we always think about what we do for one, we have to do for all, and we have to be sensitive to potential litigation, and all of that is real, right? You do have to be aware of that, but we don't necessarily have to have the one size fits all. There are some jobs that require you to be on site. If you work in manufacturing, you likely can't manufacture the product from your home. That's probably not something that is even feasible. If you are a healthcare worker, you likely can't treat a patient from your home unless you're doing telemedicine. But we all know the first line workers who have been working throughout the pandemic, those people didn't have options to work from home. And so we have to understand that. But what we also have to understand is that for the millions of people who were sent home to work during the pandemic, now have a different expectation of what work looks like. And they know it can be different. And so for CEOs to make these bold statements that they want all of their people back in the office by X date, it makes me wonder, right? My first question is, what's driving that? And is there a lack of trust? Is it that it was okay when the pandemic demanded that people work from home because that was the only way to keep the doors open? But now that we don't have to do that, they want things to go back because it's what's comfortable for them. And that's, a true leader steps outside of what's most comfortable for them. We talk about quotes. I have a quote, it's on my wall right next to me, and it's Dr. Brene Brown. And it's, you can choose courage or you can choose comfort, but you cannot have both. And I think our CEOs and our leaders need to understand that. And now is the time for them to step into their courage and trust their employees to do the meaningful, necessary work that keeps the business moving, but trust them to continue doing what they've been doing for the past 15 months from home, right? And it's a whole new way of approaching leadership for some people, right? It's moving away from managing activity to managing results and managing expectations. And I think the managing expectations piece is where communication is so critical, right? We have to communicate to people what we expect from them, when we expect it, and how, so that they can do the work they need to do, regardless of their geography. And that's where I think we will see a big gap in leadership going forward, is the people who are able to understand and get that, and the people who are not, and who's going to be left behind, right? When we think about the great migration that's happening, I don't know if you've seen this or not, but there's estimates of anywhere from 40 to 60% of workers are looking to leave their current employers as a result of this, the pandemic, and these expectations of returning back to the office.
And you bring up a good point, and that's where you really focusing on the employee, right? Focusing on the employee, their needs, their experiences, and of course, at our business at Daily Pay, we do focus on the employee and the employee experience, and through pay. So we value, and the companies and our partners value, having access to your earned income makes your life better, right? And I think that there are so many benefits that companies are now finding and realizing that these benefits are making our employees' life better. Maybe it's a 401k to get people on that savings for that path to financial wellness. Maybe there's education stipends. As I mentioned, maybe it's on-demand pay, but there are ways that companies are now realizing, well, I got to really think about my employee and my employee experience. Mm-hmm. And that relates, of course, to remote working, right? I think there used to be a stigma, right? A misnomer that working from home, you're off, gallivanting, maybe just checking in. Well, that has changed. That has changed. And as studies have shown, and we did a study here at Daily Pay, that folks are working longer hours and harder remotely. So, I think, again, that perception has certainly changed.
Mm-hmm. It has. And I love what you said about how you're connecting with employees through the product that you offer, right? That's another layer of connectivity. And when organizations think about how can they support their people and help them feel valued, a product like what you offer at Daily Pay, and allowing people access to their earned wages, and it has nothing to do with productivity or efficiency or metrics. It's doing something for your employees that makes their life holistically better. Not their life as an employee, but their life, their family, the things and people they care about will benefit from this program or this product like Daily Pay. And there are others out there. I know a lot of organizations are signing up with companies like Calm and Better Up for mental and healthcare and wellness, so that we can help support folks who have anxiety, who have stress in different ways, right? And certainly being able to access your earned wages will help minimize certain types of anxiety for people. So I think it's a wonderful way to support people and help them feel connected. And if organizations are looking at this great migration, I would think that a program like Daily Pay at a company is a great retention tool as well, because they may not have the access to their on-demand pay at another company. If they have it where they are, that could be a reason why they stay versus leap to something else. Even if they might make 25 cents an hour more at another company, that access to on-demand money makes a big difference to certain folks, right? If it could be life-changing.
When you feel valued by your boss, when you feel that you're an important part of the machine, when you feel that your work matters, you're going to stay longer at your job. When you feel that your employer is there to support you, and knows that you've got bills to pay. You have to, you should be able to have the money that you've earned, because it's your money at any point that you've earned it, right? And having that freedom and flexibility is a sign from your employer that you matter, that you value, that you're valued. And so those types of benefits, our research shows people stay up to 72% longer in some industries. That's just with daily pay. But if you're talking about, other benefits as well, again, and that communication, because you're right, the stats show, they call it the Great Resignation. Upwards of 40% of people are looking to leave their job. Maybe because they don't feel valued. Maybe because they don't have that connection to their employer. That a few easy steps really can. I certainly think that can really take care of that situation and help make things better.
40% is huge, and we think about 40% of people moving on. That's 40% of knowledge. That's 40% of client relationships. That's 40% of so many other things that we don't always think about when we think about people leaving, right? And when you have one or two people leaving here and there, you can always explain it away, right? Oh, well, they wanted to grow their career in a different way, or their family was moving. There's always a way to explain someone leaving. But in aggregate, when you look at 40% of your workforce leaving, how many of your customers are leaving as well? Right? When you think about certain industries, I think about, the person who does my hair. If she were to leave, I would follow her wherever she went. And certain industries, you're following the person, not necessarily the company. And so we've got to pay really close attention to that, because it's going to be a huge shift. And the companies who are able to retain their top talent are going to step forward. They're going to become leaders, if they're not already, in certain industries, in certain areas, because they've been able to have that stability. Because imagine diluting your employee base with 40% all new hires, right? The not only the cost, but the
onboarding.
It's crazy.
And just the know-how of the job. You're at a job longer, you're better at your job. You know how to get things done. You're in when you're a consumer-facing position, you know the customers. You recognize them. You give them that personal touch. When you maybe walk into a store or a restaurant, and there's that smiling face that you're used to seeing that gives your kid a lollipop, or asks you how the Yankees did last night. Those things matter to people, and they matter to businesses, and you will be more loyal to a business that has that.
Absolutely. So we do have a quick question that came in from Catherine. So what recommendations do you have about preparing employees to return to office and deal with the distractions, right? And this is such a great question, Catherine. And it's something I hadn't even thought of, really, is when you're working at home, you don't have coworkers popping their head into your cube or your office every 5 minutes. You don't have the distraction of people walking by and all of that. So how do we prepare people to make that shift and get comfortable with the distractions they're now going to be faced with that we haven't had in the past year? That's a really great question. I have not even given it any thought.
Yeah, I have an idea. I think is setting up something like a happy hour or a lunch, so people can sort of catch up, right? There's 16 months of graduations and births and weddings and a lot of things that you miss along the way, or just talking about, again, how the Yankees did this past season. But sort of having that reconnection moment. Maybe, again, it's a happy hour, a gathering, or just a lunch. People feel, again, more comfortable if it's outside, especially here in the summer. That's great too. But I think having that in-person get-together with people who do feel safe and comfortable going back is a great way to sort of reconnect. So when you're back in your typical office setting, you've already had that sort of catch-up that makes you feel, again, that reconnection to your coworkers.
It also immediately makes me think about the grief that people are also feeling. if we think about the loss, right, in the US alone, I think we're hovering around 1 million deaths as a result of COVID, if my statistics are accurate. So that means that not necessarily all the people who used to be there are going to be there anymore. And you may look to your left and the person who sat next to you may not be there for whatever reason. Or maybe they lost a loved one as a result of the pandemic. So to your point, I think making and creating those safe spaces and times for people to reconnect in meaningful ways, to grieve together if that's what they need to do, to celebrate if they had a birth or a wedding or whatever they're celebrating. So all of those moments that you typically share with coworkers, we still want to do that, and we've been doing it through Zoom, and now we have an opportunity to do it face to face. So I think wise employers and folks who are able to create those safe spaces and times will also benefit from that, because it's another way to show people, we care. And so on Thursdays at 1:00, we're gathering here to remember people we've lost, loved ones who have passed, and have that moment, or maybe even bring in grief counselors to help support folks who are going through those emotional times. So yeah, Catherine, we could probably have a whole nother session just on that alone. You've really gotten me thinking. So thank you. So Catherine has another comment here. So thank you. She said a colleague, it took them an hour to get to their desk because a few people were in the office and everybody wanted to reconnect. And that makes so much sense. So I think we need to plan for that. We need to plan for what people are going to need and communicate expectations, right? Of here's the times when you can connect. Here's the times when we're going to shift work from this department to this department so you guys can chat or what have you. It's a really great thought.
Yeah, as a manager, you can set up a small, not saying the entire company, but like a small happy hour for your team, a small lunch for your team. Those are the opportunities. Again, in that small, comfortable, safe group, you can, really share those experiences over the past year or so.
Yeah, and I think a lot of companies are doing that, and they're also bringing people in to those sessions, whether it is through Zoom or, handwritten notes to people saying, hey, just so you know, you're still part of us. We miss you. We love you. Connect with us when you're ready, and letting folks know who might not feel safe returning that they're still welcome. When they are ready, they're still welcome to come. And creating opportunities for people to have that flexibility is going to be huge. And I know we talked about it earlier, but I can't stress it enough that just because you can require people to come back to the office doesn't mean you should. And we've got to be super sensitive to that. All right, we've got another comment here, so we'll bring that in. Yeah, so I get that. Exactly what we were just talking about.
Right.
Leaders need to be sensitive that people need time to reconnect on their terms. So if you're somebody who's creating work schedules, maybe you need to think about the work volume and diluting those work hours a little bit more than you did before. So someone may not be sitting at their desk from the dot of 9 to the dot of 5. And they're expected to answer, 20 calls an hour. You may need to reduce that metric for a while to give people time to kind of reacclimate to this whole scenario and get comfortable with where they are and who they're next to, and give them space for those conversations. So really great thoughts, guys. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah, I mean, just think about sometimes when somebody back in the before times, when they'd come back from a honeymoon or a vacation, or even if they were out sick, they had surgery, and they came back, how was the reaction? Hey, how are you doing? There's the catch up. Well, imagine that magnified by the entire office.
Right.
So there has to be some time allotted for that catch up. And it's not just 2 weeks, it's a year and 4 months. So again, people need that time to reconnect.
We do. We all do, for sure. Awesome. This has been such a great conversation, David. I thank you so much for giving me and all of us time to have this dialogue, and I definitely will be inviting you back. It's such a great conversation. And I just, I love these sessions because the conversations are so organic, and you never know which way they're going to go, and the different nuggets that we get and the different thoughts that we now, my brain is like, oh my gosh, I didn't even think about what Catherine brought up. So now I'm thinking, okay, well, there's another session coming along just from that. So I want to thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing, your stories, your information, all the great things that Daily Pay is doing for employees, not only within your organization, but with the clients you support, and how you're helping companies connect to their employees is so meaningful. And as a former user of your product in my organization, I can't endorse you guys enough. And I don't really put my name behind a lot of product because I find it disingenuous. But if anybody follows me, they know I'm a huge fan of Daily Pay and an advocate for what you guys are doing, because you really are transforming lives and helping employers connect with people in so many different ways that we don't even think about. So I thank you for being here. We're not going to go to 1 o'clock today, which is fine. And anyone who didn't have a chance to catch us live, don't worry, I download the video and then I upload it to my website, and I will share the link so that anybody who may want to watch after the session has the ability to do so. So thank you, David. I am so grateful for you. And I can't wait till you make your next visit to Tampa so we can go to Burns together.
Looking forward to it. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, everybody.
All the best.
Thank you so much. Okay, bye-bye.